In the magical world of Ulf, an eternal war rages between mortals, who've got expiration dates, and immortals, who respawn like they've hacked the system. The war's fate hinged on a showdown between Graham, the mortal hero, and Velto, the demon lord with unlimited lives. Normally, Velto would mop the floor with any mortal, but Graham's holy sword dealt a blow so powerful it broke through Velto's endless regeneration and sent him packing. Velto, being a sore loser, swore he'd return for revenge before dramatically vanishing. Fast forward 500 years, and Velto's back, thanks to his ride-or-die servant, Makina, who's been waiting all this time. She apologizes for her casual Friday attire, but Velto's just stoked she managed to pull off his resurrection. Ready to conquer the world again, Velto quickly finds out things have changed, big time. Makina fills him in. 80 years ago, Ulf and Earth decided to fuse. The result? Most people died, governments fell apart, and cities turned into independent states. Now, Earth's tech and Ulf's magic have mashed together, creating a world that's both futuristic and mystical. Velto, of course, is completely blown away. As he's marveling at this new reality, Velto nearly bumps into a random guy on the street, annoyed that no one recognizes his god-tier presence. So, naturally, he tries to flex with some grand magic. The city's reaction? A collective eye roll and an alarm turns out. Using big magic in public is a no-no. Velto's forced to bail before getting busted, but not before spotting someone who looks an awful lot like Graham, his old nemesis. Once they're safe, Makina drops more bad news. After Velto's defeat, mortals got smart, invented anti-immortal weapons, and nearly wiped out his kind. His dark peers? Mostly missing, dead, or sacrificed themselves for his grand comeback. Talk about loyalty. Later, Velto stumbles across a young hacker messing with giant billboards, throwing up some spicy content for fun. Impressed, he asks if she knows where to find Marcus, one of his old subordinates. She points him to a tower, where Marcus has now risen to CEO status. Fancy, right? Velto storms in, expecting the usual bowing and scraping. Instead, Marcus, sitting like a smug king, laughs in his face. Turns out, Marcus has no interest in rebuilding the immortal kingdom. Velto tries to remind Marcus who's boss, but Marcus's assistant effortlessly blocks his magic, leaving Velto stunned. Apparently, Marcus has leveled up way past him, and Velto, the once fearsome demon lord, is now just yesterday's news. Marcus had been waiting for this moment for years, savoring the chance to finally knock Velto off his high horse. With a smug grin, he dropped the news. Velto's once mighty strength was nothing more than a dusty old relic. Then, for dramatic flair, Marcus revealed a slick implant in the back of his neck. Velto, of course, had no idea what it was, so Marcus kindly pulled up a tutorial because, even villains need tech support sometimes. The implant, called a familia, was a magic game changer. Normally, spellcasting was like filling out an overly complicated tax form, a 5-step nightmare. But the familia let anyone, yes, even your average Joe, skip 3 of those steps and throw spells like a pro. And in case Velto was thinking of snagging one for himself, Marcus gleefully informed him that it was incompatible with higher beings like Velto. Velto, curious as ever, asked why Marcus was doing all of this. Marcus didn't hold back. He had loathed Velto from the moment they met. Velto had been a tyrant, arrogant, and worst of all, actually capable enough to justify that arrogance. Back then, Marcus had no choice but to grin and bear it, but now, well, the tables had turned. With a dramatic flair, Marcus unleashed a flurry of blood swords at Velto, who couldn't dodge fast enough and ended up getting stabbed multiple times before being launched out of a window. Marcus, finally free from Velto's shadow, declared himself the new demon lord. But in true office comedy fashion, his secretary immediately reminded him that they still had to discuss the company mascot's promotional campaign, so he waved her off to the next meeting. Meanwhile, Velto crash landed back in the city, and his regeneration was moving slower than a Monday morning. He staggered into the street, accidentally bumped into someone, and because things just weren't going his way immediately lost a fight, finding himself face first in a pile of trash. Lying there, he couldn't help but wonder why he kept losing to mere mortals. It was starting to feel like a bad trend. Luckily, Makina came to the rescue, helping Velto onto a train while apologizing for not telling him about Marcus's betrayal sooner. Velto waved her off, saying even if she'd told him, he would have wanted to see it with his own eyes. When they arrived at her apartment, Velto, assuming the entire building belonged to her, was surprised when she led him to her tiny room. It turned out this was all she could afford on her salary. Touched by her loyalty, Velto pulled her close and thanked her for staying true to him all these years. Back in the day, Makina had been hunted by the people of her time, blamed for everything just because she was immortal. Their brilliant solution: toss her into a volcano. Fortunately for her, Velto had swooped in and saved the day. That was how they first met, and Velto, ever the smooth talker, offered her the chance to devote herself to him. From that day forward, Makina remained his most loyal follower. The next morning, Makina got up early to make breakfast, checking in with her virtual assistant Elate, a mini version of herself that rattled off the day's forecast and schedule. When Velto sat down to eat, the unfamiliar food smelled incredible, and sure enough, it tasted just as good. After breakfast, Velto asked her about the Familia. Curious about its perks, he wanted to know if she'd heard of any other immortals. Makina mentioned that a few had survived the immortal hunts, though she'd lost contact with two close friends. Mysteriously, they had disappeared, leaving only a cryptic note behind. As Velto read the note, his hand suddenly flinched from the sharp pain of his still healing wounds, spilling tea everywhere. His once godlike regeneration had slowed to a crawl, and even his spellcasting had become a shadow of what it used to be. Makina speculated it was because the faith that had powered him in his prime had dwindled, reduced to mere history book footnotes. Velto, ever the strategist, decided it was time to make himself known again. They headed out into the city for some shopping. Makina led Velto to a store and had his body scanned for new clothes, apologizing for the budget options. Velto, always confident in his natural beauty, didn't mind. The store's virtual assistant suggested a tracksuit, which Velto loved, especially when he found out the symbols on the back spelled out Demon Lord. Later, over fast food, Velto asked Makina what it was like to have a Familia installed. Despite Marcus's betrayal, he had to admit that the Familia was an incredible device, making magic easier and doubling as a one-stop shop for everything from communication to information gathering. Makina reminisced about the pre-Familia days when people had to fumble around with smartphones. How quaint. Velto asks Makina to show him her Familia implant. As he starts inspecting it, she's caught off guard, but not in a bad way, so much so that her Familia warns her that her heart rate just shot up. When he's done, Velto casually asks if it's uncomfortable having something like that jammed into the back of her neck. Makina admits it was strange at first, but once it became illegal for companies to stream ads directly into people's heads, everyone kind of had to get used to it. Life without a Familia is practically impossible now, though it's clear it hasn't exactly improved Makina's living situation. As they walk home, Velto declares that he's going to get a job. Makina's eyes nearly pop out of her head, and she quickly assures him that he doesn't need to do anything as lowly as work. Sure, her life's a bit of a financial mess, but she'll just take on more shifts, maybe even juggle 2 or 3 jobs. Velto interrupts, reminding her that times have changed. He's no longer the almighty god he once was, and besides, it wouldn't feel right sitting around while Makina busts her chops to provide for him. No royal duties to keep him busy means he's got to adapt, but don't worry, world domination is still on the table. He asks if she'll stick with him, and Makina swears her loyalty forever. Later, Velto is about to head out to look for a job, but Makina won't let him go alone. She's worried something will go wrong, so she offers to call off work and tag along. Velto tells her no way, what if he doesn't land a job, and they still need her income. Makina reluctantly agrees, handing him a device with some emergency cash and a tracker, because, of course, she's already in overprotective mode. Out on the streets, Velto realizes he's clueless about how to actually get a job. Desperate, he starts shouting that he's broke and needs work. One guy approaches and, after telling Velto to keep it down, suggests he head to the commercial guild with a citizen ID. Velto, confused, reveals he doesn't even know what that is. The guy assumes Velto must be an immigrant, offers some advice, and warns him to stay clear of any jobs under the shady EMA company, especially in construction, where safety regulations are just a suggestion. Velto heads to the commercial guild and, during the interview, proudly lists wide-scale annihilation magic, dungeon creation, and leading a nation 500 years ago as his key skills. The interviewer, unimpressed, informs him there's no job for someone with his, unique qualifications. Besides, Velto's lack of a familia makes him ineligible for hire anyway. Velto returns home feeling defeated, so he collapses onto Makina's lap and asks if he's really become useless in this world. She reassures him that he's still far superior to everyone else so much so that he should just let her handle the work. But Velto's too stubborn to sit idle and asks if there's anyone she can call for help. It turns out Makina has someone in mind. Velto's shocked to hear she has a friend, but Makina insists that even though they hang out, eat together, and have sleepovers, it doesn't mean they're friends. A little while later, they meet up with Makina's not a friend at a cafe. And surprise, it's the hacker girl Velto ran into the day before. She introduces herself as Takahashi and is immediately starstruck. She starts poking Velto to make sure he's real, but Makina snaps at her for being disrespectful. Velto brushes it off after all, he's the one asking her for help here. Curious about her familia, Velto reaches over to inspect Takahashi's implant, and while she's startled at first, she lets him finish. Velto apologizes, explaining he noticed her familia was different from Makina's and wanted to check it out. Takahashi, amazed by his abilities, learns that Velto has a Sage Eye power, allowing him to analyze the mana flow in anything he touches. Despite his insight, there are still some things about the familia he can't fully figure out yet. Now, to the real reason they're there. Velto needs work, and since the guild turned him down, Takahashi has to come up with an alternative. After a quick brainstorm, Takahashi lands on the perfect solution. A 5-year-old demon lord with a great voice, a handsome face, and no familia? The answer is clear. Velto is going to become a streamer. Takahashi, with a glint in her eye, explains how streamers rake in cash just by doing stuff on camera thanks to ad money and fan donations. She's even got some leftover gear from her own streaming days, although it's a bit on the vintage side. Makina, however, is firmly against the idea, saying streaming is as reliable as a weather forecast in a hurricane and suggests he consider a real job, like flipping burgers. But Takahashi thinks otherwise, pointing out that Velto's got the looks, voice, and sheer aura that could turn him into the next internet sensation. Reluctantly, Makina admits Velto is kind of charming, but she's still not sold on his path to digital stardom. Velto figures he might as well give it a shot. So, later that evening, while Makina's taking a bath, Velto dives into research on the internet. He's awestruck by its reach until he realizes it's mostly cat videos and questionable content. Nonetheless, he figures he could use this to his advantage. A couple hours later, Takahashi shows up with her dusty equipment. She hands Velto a controller, but he surprises her by navigating the interface like he was born holding a gamepad. He picks Bloodborne, which Takahashi warns is the rage quit champ of all games. Still, Velto gets nowhere. After hours of play, he can barely make it past the intro. Takahashi bluntly tells him he's terrible, and while Makina thinks she's being harsh, Velto admits he's struggling. Makina worries this could doom his streaming career, but Takahashi thinks his hot guy who fails confidently vibe might just make him internet gold. Next on the agenda, crafting a memorable intro, since the world is drowning in streamers and only a handful actually make money. Velto thinks he could just say his name, but Takahashi shoots that down fast. Makina suggests he go full Warden mode with a grand, foolish mortals declaration, which he gives a shot. Takahashi's into it, but thinks it needs more oomph. Then comes streaming 101. Keep it daily, avoid touchy topics unless he wants a swift ban, and make sure Makina's never seen on camera to dodge any girlfriend rumors. Takahashi even ropes in a friend to promote Velto's stream as a favor. Time passes, and Velto starts gaining viewers. His confidence and unflappable attitude toward trolls who he actually encourages to roast him end up working in his favor. Eventually, he hits 1 million views and decides to commemorate the milestone with an all-nighter to finish Bloodborne 3. Fans are glued to the screen, and as fate would have it, just as Makina returns home, Velto finally clears the game. Exhausted but exhilarated, he thanks his viewers, both loyal and trollish, and ends the stream. As Makina checks in on him, Velto decides to head out for a quick walk to pick up a package, and Makina offers to have dinner ready when he returns. Strolling through the city's rougher neighborhoods, Velto unexpectedly spots a familiar face, Graham, his sworn enemy from another life, sitting on the sidewalk. Once a dutiful brother, Graham had gone herb picking to help his sick sister, only to return and find his home and family turned to ashes. Now, they're sitting at a noodle shop, both fully aware of the irony. Velto tries breaking the tension with talk about noodles, but Graham's understandably terse. When the noodles arrive, Graham bluntly admits it's surreal sharing a meal with the enemy who destroyed his life. Velto feels the same, considering Graham once slayed countless of Velto's allies. When Velto asks how Graham's still kicking, Graham explains he was granted eternal youth by the goddess Melia after defeating Velto. Apparently, she had a soft spot for Graham. Velto muses that this world probably wouldn't let someone so powerful off the hook anyway. Graham shares that after ending the war, people inexplicably turned on him, and he spent centuries wandering, lost to both mortals and immortals. When he asks Velto why he tried ruling in the first place, Velto explains he saw it as the only way to create world peace, since people seemed doomed to hate and persecute each other. Graham can't endorse Velto's approach, but he admits that people left to their own devices aren't likely to find peace either. With a mutual nod of respect, they part ways, and Graham thanks Velto for the noodles. As Velto continues on, he spots Takahashi in an alley, squaring off against a rough-looking ogre who's demanding double pay for a job. Velto intervenes, catching the ogre's punch mid-air. The ogre, however, recognizes him as the guy he beat up previously, so he isn't worried. Takahashi warns Velto to leave, but he's itching to test how much power he's gained since hitting 1 million views. The ogre activates wind magic, shattering Velto's arm, but Velto regenerates it instantly and knocks the ogre into a pile of trash, much to Takahashi's amazement. She then asks Velto to be her bodyguard for the day, promising to pay him. Since he still owes her a favor, Velto agrees. Takahashi leads him to a warehouse, explaining her plan to swipe something valuable inside. Before she can finish explaining, Velto, in true fashion, kicks the door open, accidentally barging into a major Yakuza operation. Velto, looking a bit lost, pings Takahashi over the comms. "Hey, is that cube thing on the table our target?" She confirms but can't hide her confusion. How is he even contacting her without a familia? Smugly, Velto explains he just borrowed the communication ether the familia uses and recreated it with magic. Simple enough. With only a few goons around, he figures he'll handle them quickly and grab the cube. Takahashi insists on 0 fatalities, so he reluctantly agrees, and for style points, he starts the fight with his iconic streaming intro, which falls flat, since the Yakuza aren't exactly his core audience. The awkward silence is a reminder. 1 million followers might feel like a lot online, but they aren't in this room. No matter, he'll just show these guys what they're missing out on. The Yakuza, baffled by the situation, assume Velto's some sort of eccentric and start shooting, magic guns blazing. Velto shrugs it off, enhancing himself to deflect bullets until his attacker's out of ammo, then easily starts knocking them out like it's a casual workout. Desperate, one Yakuza reaches for a regular gun, but Takahashi steps in, casting an illusion that makes him accidentally shoot his partner instead. Soon, the room's cleared, and Veltal inspects a strange card ammo gun as Takahashi strolls in, duly impressed. Time to grab the box and make a run for it, except trouble just rolled in. Suddenly, an invisible force attacks Veltal. He blasts it with his new gun, revealing a giant mech. Takahashi identifies it as top-tier Magino gear, something way out of the Yakuza's price range. Intrigued by the challenge, Veltal opens fire, but predictably, his weapon barely scratches the mech. The pilot responds with a much bigger magic gun, but Veltal's quicker and finds a blind spot overhead. He drops down with a blast that would flatten a small building, though it's not quite enough for this heavyweight. No problem, he draws his sword, and, as if on cue, the mech's weapon morphs into a matching blade. They charge. Just as Veltal's getting into the rhythm, the mech pilot gets serious, catching Veltal off guard and managing to slice off his arm and, well, his head. The pilot smugly reports Veltal's demise until Veltal's decapitated head starts speaking, complimenting his skills but scolding him for not double-checking the kill. As a reward for an exciting battle, Veltal summons his ultimate weapon, Vernal, with an aura so intense the mech pilot can only stare in horror. Veltal dismantles the mech piece by piece until the pilot, desperately, activates a self-execution protocol to keep any intel from leaking. Takahashi finally emerges, visibly shaken, but Veltal's unfazed. He's actually more impressed by the weaponry than anything, muttering about how terrifying this time period must be. Takahashi, on the other hand, thinks he's the real terror, considering he just trashed a war-grade mech built by Marcus's company, something even the Yakuza wouldn't dare buy. This mission just got a lot messier. Turning their attention to the cube, Takahashi explains it's a high-tech storage device. She pulls up a list of names on her reader, and Veltal's eyes narrow. These are his immortal subjects. Takahashi tries contacting her client, but with no answer, they decide to pay him a visit. She leads Veltal to the high-security apartment, hacks them in like it's nothing, and they head to the elevator. Veltal insists on pushing the button because, well, he just likes pressing buttons. Takahashi tells him it's not so simple. This elevator requires a bizarre floor sequence before it'll take them to the 13th. Veltal's ready to head out, but Takahashi stops him, warning of her client's paranoid traps. Veltal chuckles luckily. It looks like all the traps have mysteriously disarmed themselves. When they finally reach Eju's front door, Takahashi rings the bell. No answer. It's weird. Eju may dodge phone calls, but he never leaves a knock unanswered. Suspicious, Veltal nudges the door, and it swings open. This is odd. Eju's the last person to leave his door unlocked. Red flags waving, Veltal suggests they proceed with caution. Takahashi takes the lead toward Eju's workroom, where they find him slumped in his chair, soaked in blood and unmistakably dead. Takahashi panics, but Veltal keeps his cool, leaning in to inspect. He recalls seeing this guy before, though back then, he was dressed in a heap of trash. Takahashi nods, explaining that's just Eju's style when gathering intel. Examining the wounds, a chest stab, a neck gash, and the state of the blood, Veltal deduces Eju's been dead a few days. Given the surgical efficiency of the killing, this wasn't a crime of passion. It screams hitman. Whoever did this even destroyed Eju's familia to bury his intel. Seems someone wanted whatever Eju knew gone for good, and it might just be connected to the job he'd hired Takahashi for. She takes a beat, then starts searching the room, confident Eju would have hidden extra data in case something like this happened. Sure enough, she unearths a laptop in a hidden drawer, but the files are a garbled mess. Veltal spots a pattern and points it out, allowing Takahashi to piece the fragments together, finally revealing a video message from Eju. In it, he explains he made the recording in case he was killed before finishing his investigation. According to Eju, the city's prosperity is built on a terrifying truth. The ether reactor at the heart of the city, which should require power from 10 ley lines, somehow runs off just 2. he's uncovered that it's drawing extra power from the Immortal Furnace project. This twisted machine burns immortal souls as fuel, producing energy far greater than what mortal souls could ever yield. Edu's intel reveals that Marcus's company employed homeless people to build the furnace. But once it was completed, they all vanished, likely killed to become fuel as well. Worse, one of Veltal's own trusted subordinates, Zeno, was among the first immortals sacrificed. This was all Marcus's plan: turn public opinion against immortals so he could harvest them under the guise of justice, then burn their souls for ether. Recently, Marcus even bought intel from the Yakuza on more immortals, a sure sign his supply is running low. When the video ends, Takahashi is furious at how immortals are being treated, though she knows that trying to expose this would probably get her killed, just like Edu. Veltal reassures her that this is an immortal's problem, and as their king, it's his duty to fix it. For now, they notify the authorities about Edu's death to ensure he gets a proper burial. As they leave, Veltal attempts to contact Machina to inform her about the furnace, but to his shock, she isn't responding. Something is seriously wrong.